Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us in today's National Science Week kickoff, our webinar for National Science Week. And today's webinar is all about introducing you to inquiry-based learning in the context of STEM. My name is Lena Hammond. I'm a head trainer here at Little Scientists, and I also work in the office on all sorts of things. And Hayley, my colleague, is not in the office at the moment, but Hayley, would you like to introduce yourself?
I work for Little Scientists. I do their Little Scientist House program. So I know that quite a few of you are Little Scientist Houses. So hello. And I am also alongside Lena, one of the head trainers. So I'll be doing a little bit of practical work today. But next week, we will be full on practical hands-on activities as well. So, and I will send you a little list of equipment that you can find in your own home that you might want to do some hands-on practical alongside. Okay. But today, Lena's running the show, and I'm here for support and to bounce some ideas off.
Let's see how we go. So, over to today's agenda. So what we're going to be looking at today, or discussing today more correctly, is the what, why, the who, and the how of inquiry-based STEM learning. So we're going to go over, briefly go over STEM and the various branches of STEM and what that is, how, or rather why, we need early STEM education, and talk about the future-ready skills and the skills that come out of early STEM education, why it is so important that we do this in early childhood. And then we'll be discussing how do children learn? How can we create the right environments for children to learn in? So let's jump straight in, shall we? Hayley, STEM, talk to us about STEM.
Oh, that's mean. Okay. Well, it's hard for me to say where real life stops and where STEM starts, because to me, STEM is embedded in my entire life. And I guess since starting with Little Scientists, spotting those everyday STEM opportunities is becoming more and more common for me. So I would say that STEM is everywhere. It's embedded in my life. It's embedded in everyone else's lives. And I wouldn't necessarily say it was the baking soda volcano. I would say for me, it is an observation. It's a skill. It's spotting those STEM opportunities, thinking about the why, and I would find it hard to not do that continually now, because I've been doing this for quite some time. So
yes. Oh, you touched on so many points there that we are definitely going to get into. And I think key to what you started off with saying is that it's everywhere. And that's one of the things to really understand about STEM and STEM education is its relevance to our everyday lives, not just those of scientists out there. So if we might want to break down the acronym for STEM. I'm sure you all know. Yeah, Hayley?
For those of us that don't know what the acronym is, STEM, S for science, T for technology, and that can be design and technology. That's not just technology. When we say technology, a lot of people think information technology, but we at Little Scientists think of it as technology as in any form of tool that you use. Engineering is the E, and the M is one of my favourite subjects, mathematics. But Lena's giggling because I am actually really very fond of mathematics. But there's also an A sometimes slipped in there. And Lena, I know you know my opinions of the A. Would you like to explain what you think about the A?
Art. Oh, look, that's a debate, and we could go on probably for days and hours and weeks on end whether A should be included. And I think that's probably An individual's perspective. So I'm not going to go hands off. No opinion.
Well, I would just say that I've been to a few international STEM conferences in Berlin actually, and in a lot of countries the A stands for applied, not art. So I've had some very exciting conversations with actually some very passionate people from South America about how the A to them means science, technology, engineering, and mathematics applied to real life. But from my point of view, if you are spotting the STEM in every day anyway, then obviously that applied is already implied, if you like. So
absolutely. So I like to think about the different branches of STEM and how and what they are in a little bit of depth to kind of understand the context for why and how they are apparent in everyday life. So if we consider science as a systematic understanding of the world around us. So science is about asking questions and checking our ideas about those questions. So posing hypothesis and testing these kinds of things. And, one of the great things about science is it is a methodology to check and test things. So it is in constant refinement. But ultimately, when we come across a scientific phenomena, a physical phenomena, for example, it can be proven across and independently. So I think one of the examples I could give you for this is the theory of evolution, which everybody attributes to Charles Darwin, of course. But around the same time as Charles Darwin, there was this wonderful fellow by the name of Wallace who came up with his own theory of evolution, and it is much on par with Darwin's. So they came up with the same theory by looking and questioning and asking the same kinds of questions about the world around them. Now, science is a really is the start of STEM, maybe because it sounds good in the acronym, but it also it starts the offshoot for the other arms of STEM. So, engineering, for example, is really using what we know about the scientific world to solve problems that we have and how we want to use the science that we know about and the physical phenomena that we know and apply it. And an example of this might be, the phenomena of electromagnetism was really the scientific discovery that jump-started the telecommunication industry. And a long time ago, that started and began through Morse code, and of course is completely different to what you might recognise now. Now, the engineering arm of STEM created the Morse code. Now, the technology part, I like this, the technology part is that process of refining and applying new knowledge and engineering skill to optimize. So, of course, now we have wonderful satellites and telephones.
Can I just interrupt you there? I think you'll find that without the mathematics behind any of those things, you couldn't have found them in the first place.
So maybe it should be MST.
Well, personally, I think maths should be up there at the front.
That's, of course you will.
Going back to something you were saying about science, how about the fact that science is the observation of phenomena and the study of those things, but you cannot observe something unless you're standing back from it. Yes. So science is when you stand back and you're observing and you're looking and describing. And then engineering is when you're using it or building it. And then technology are the that you use to engineer something.
Yes.
How would you agree sort of with that? Or?
Yes, I think technology is one of those tricky ones, because a tool as simple as a stick we would describe as technology that was part of how humans discovered fire way back when. Yet technology, yes, it is the mobile phone, it is the laptop that I'm speaking to, but it also is the nuclear reactor, but that's also been engineered. So there's this continual process around technology and engineering, and without basic technology, which turns into more complicated technology, where we discover new scientific phenomena because we can see it and we can understand it. So we build upon our own scientific knowledge by engineering and new technology. And of course, as you say, Hayley, we must have a mathematical view to be able to understand any of that. Now, I had a look at the etymology of mathematics and the word mathematics, and it's really interesting. In ancient Greek, it means learning, and in ancient Hebrew, it means thinking. Now, if you consider maths something which is ridiculously abstract, well, it is, but hang on, stay with me there. It is ridiculously abstract, but it's also because it develops critical, logical, and analytical thinking, it makes the world less abstract. Yes?
Maths is the way you generalize the world. Okay, so you can the concept of 3, for instance, is transferable, but so you can have 3 bananas, you can have 3 people, you can have 3 movies, you can have 3 anything, but that the 3 itself is an abstract thought. So yes, I would agree with you there. It just reminds me of when I can remember going to pick up my little girl from childcare, and the educator saying, "Oh, did you know she could count?" And I said, "Oh, I don't think she can." And the educator going, "Oh, Hannah, count." And Hannah went, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And I was like, "Well, Hannah, how many blocks have I got in my hand?" And she went, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And she honestly didn't understand the concept of 3, but she could actually say the numbers in order, which to me wasn't counting, but was a step towards it, I guess. So
I love that.
The understanding behind it, I think, is the key.
I love that. So I think, so understanding those branches of STEM and really being able to concrete in our minds as educators why it's important to understand STEM and why it's important to begin learning STEM early in childhood is a key part of being able to facilitate and teach it. Now, I always have people saying, I don't know anything, it's too difficult. I don't know the facts. I don't know the reasoning. And I want to run a really small poll with you. This is an engineering poll, because we often think, oh gosh, engineering, what a big topic. I don't know how to do that. And it's actually interesting because we use engineering in early childhood a lot. So let's have a quick think about this particular question. Now, you might not have come across this phrase before, but now you're going to be Googling it and looking at it all the time. In engineering terms, which of these is not considered a simple machine? So somewhat like a tool, a simple machine are really the most basic parts to bigger tools and engineered devices and machines that we use. And these are really simple and we use them every day. So a pulley, for example, well, you know what a pulley is, but you might see examples of this on a crane. An inclined plane, a wedge, a hinge, a screw, a lever, a wheel, an axle. I don't want to give away the clues, the answer just yet. I'll give you another few seconds to vote. This is really interesting.
I'm not sure I know the answer to this one.
Oh, haha. Okay. It will become very apparent when you find out. It will be one of those aha moments. All right, I'm going to end this one. Okay, let me show you how everybody voted. Now, interestingly enough, no one voted the correct one, but that's okay. We'll discuss why. So a pulley, of course, you'll find in cranes, and in early childhood, I've seen beautiful cranes and buckets all over the place carrying things on a rope and a wheel. An inclined plane is something as simple as a ramp. You might use a ramp instead of a staircase. It's much easier to push a big heavy box up a ramp than it is to try and turn it upstairs. A wedge is something like a doorstop or the end of an axe. We use it to as a stopper or to cut things. A knife is actually a wedge. A screw, obviously, you have a screw, which is a screw, but consider something like this also. This is a screw. There you go. We have these every day. A lever is very interesting. A lever could be a seesaw. It could be a pair of scissors, which is two levers. A lever could be simply a fork that we use to eat with. And a wheel and axle, of course, we find those on cars, bikes. A door handle, for example, is also a wheel and a simple machine. So the one that is not a simple machine is a hinge. And if you think about how a hinge is constructed, you might be able to discover that there are quite a few simple machines within the hinge itself, which makes it a slightly more complex machine. So there you go. We are using engineering things all the time. All right, so moving on. Why do we need early STEM education, Hayley? Why?
Oh, how long have you got?
Yes.
Why do we need early STEM education? We need early STEM education for a myriad of reasons. One of them, I think, is because we need to push up. I sometimes go into primary schools as part of my job as well, and I often see the odd worksheet floating around. But I think the reason why we mostly need early STEM education is so that we can influence secondary school as well. I think it's skills-based that will not only for STEM. Inquiry-based learning, in my opinion, is not only for STEM. It's an attitude and a way of facing problem solving, and I think the earlier that we embed that, the better. I think it's because we do early childhood STEM every day, and we don't necessarily spot the fact that we are doing it every day. I think one of the things one of those phrases I trot out the most often is we're not asking you to do anything any different. We're asking you to just look at it in a different way. And I think that's what we're about. And I think the more we can embed that in early childhood and push that up through our education system.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that other pillar of co-construction is really important as well. And I think we need to.
Absolutely. I might just share my screen again and show you a few slides. So, why, people often think about STEM as a bit of a niche area of education, when, as we've already found out, it's really part of our daily lives. But we have to think about what are our daily lives going to be like in the future, and we don't really know what that is. But one of the whys behind the importance of STEM education could be this: that the future of our world is going to be very different. We're already seeing a lot of automation, and so simply doing things is not how humans are going to be perceived as useful in the future. How we perceive ourselves to be useful in the future are really the skills that Hayley talks about behind STEM. So it's not just about STEM itself, but it's the skills behind it that allow us to be more adaptive in our future. So, we are able to know information, but, computers can compute mathematical equations for us much faster than we can. But our capacity to adapt is much better than computers. So there you go. Knowledge is crucial. Young people need to understand how to find it, how to interpret it, how to use it, and importantly, how and when to act on it. So the skills that we're really trying to bring out in early STEM education are these, what they call soft skills: responsibility, independence, self-confidence, critical thinking, resilience, getting things wrong, but trying again. Our research skills and our metacognitive skills, that is the skills to understand our own cognition and how we think and how we can solve problems. So when we understand ourselves better and how we solve problems better, we are better equipped to be able to solve those problems. There is a story.
Who doesn't want that? Who doesn't want that for the children in their care? That's what I love about that list, is that I want that for everybody, and I think the sooner that we start embedding those skills, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know it's what people are already doing in their own service or centre.
Yeah, and you think about, critical thinking and fact-checking skills and logic. In this day and age, we are being fed information left, right, and centre. You can get any information you want off the internet, but to be able to critically question it and ask why and how and is this true is a skill that all of us could build on. So, being able to begin massaging and learning these skills in our early years is critical to be able to continue to use them and develop them later in life as well. There is this story that I've heard a few times in different ways that goes along the lines of, there's a factory with lots of workers, and that, the factory's machines are all tinkering away doing what they're meant to do, and then suddenly that all comes to a stop, and the workers are running around madly trying to figure out what's going on. Nobody can figure it out, and ultimately the head manager or what have you calls in the expert, brings the expert in, and the expert has a look around for a minute, looks in one little area and turns a certain screw, and everything comes back to life. And the manager says, "Great, excellent, send me the bill." He writes the bill, $1,000, and gives it to him. And the manager says, "Hang on a moment, you only turned one screw. I want an itemized bill." And the man writes, "Turning the screw, $1. Knowing which screw to turn, $999. Right? So being able to know which screw to turn, being able to know how to use the knowledge that we have is such an important skill. And the great thing about STEM and inquiry-based learning is we're building these skills. It's not just about learning science facts and engineering skills, but the soft stuff.
But in my mind, it's not just, yes, that's important. And yes, skills for the future are important. And yes, there are a lot of things I can see coming that our children will have to face and our children will have to problem solve. But those skills that you've put up there, such as resilience, curiosity, all of those, in my mind, are happiness skills. They're equipping our children to deal with day-to-day life. Having that self-efficacy to being able to know that I can solve my own problems is one of the most empowering things, I think, that we can give to our children. So yes, STEM and the ability to know what screw to turn, but I think the ability to know what screw to turn in life and to get through life and to understand my own thought process, that metacognition, to be able to think about the way I'm thinking about things is also it is the most important thing we can give to our children. So
absolutely. I love how this links to my next topic that I wanted to go on to, because as educators, as parents in this particular climate, I'm sure you would have come across the phrase growth mindset. And these STEM skills, that's what Hayley's talking about, that can-do attitude, that ability to get up and go again, is really in that growth mindset field of psychology and positive psychology. And one of the reasons why this is so important in early childhood is because our early years, as you might well know, is when the brain is undergoing its most significant development. It is when we are forming our beliefs about the world around us, and it is when we are forming our beliefs about ourselves. So to be able to form your core belief about yourself that I can do this, I can improve, I can get up, is a really foundational part of self-awareness and happiness, as Hayley says. So, you know, I love to talk about this, as Hayley knows, so I try not to talk about it too much, but it's really interesting to understand, you know, when you understand a little bit about the brain, you have more knowledge to be able to use it and to also to nourish and educate children. So, you know, human brains of interest to people we are born with far less developed brains than most other animals. And this actually has its benefits. One of the benefits is that the environment that we grow up in has a huge capacity to influence how our brains grow and develop. Now, learning, as it were, is a physical or biophysical change in our brain where our neurons are firing and wiring together and making new synaptic connections. And remembering is really about repeating those same experiences to make those learning connections stronger and stronger. And when you are young, before the age of, well, I think it was about, as a 5-year-old, your brain is about 20% less developed than an adult brain, but it has 50% more synapses. That's amazing. Basically, what that tells us is that children are primed for learning. They are there waiting to experience the world around them and take what they know and turn it into something permanent. Now, my daughter, when I say practice makes perfect, says, oh, you know, she yells and screams at me, but I've changed it now. I say practice makes permanent, because it is literally our brains creating something physical, that is the connections between our neurons. When we experience and do something, when we repeat it, we are making it permanent in our mind. And the more often we repeat something, the more automatic it becomes. Now, I can give you evidence of this, which is how often in your day do you have to consider how to walk? There are so many processes that have to go into place to walking, but you no longer think about them, and you've probably stopped thinking about them by the time you're about 2. And that is because we practice. And I have to say, this is one of my best examples that I always give my children when they have that stop, when they can't do something and they say, Mom, I can't do it. I say, oh dear, it's the walking story again, isn't it? Do you remember when you learnt to walk? I remember. You got up and you fell down and you hurt yourself, but you kept getting up. Now, do you really need to think about how you walk? And usually that gets them going again, gets them back on the soccer field or whatever it is.
I think what you're just doing there is underlining 2 of my favourite things, which is the importance of play and the importance of repetition. And I can give you that example of the little girl in the cafe I was in quite a long time ago. It's been a long time since I went and sat in a cafe, but she'd got one of the spoons and she's banging it on the table, banging it on the chair, banging it on her mum's head at one point, and she was just listening to the different noises that it was making, and it was the most scientific investigation into acoustics that I'd seen for a really long time. It was wonderful to watch, and she kept going back and just checking that it was still making the same noise. After it had changed, she'd made a different sound, and then she'd go back and still check that hitting it on the table was still making the same sound, and it wasn't the spoon hadn't changed. and the noise hadn't changed when she hit it against the table. And it was really interesting to watch. And the poor mother was desperately trying to stop her from doing it because it was disturbing people, and people were tutting and rolling up their eyes. And I was absolutely fascinated. It was brilliant. So yes, I'm with you on the practice, definitely.
And I think everybody would agree that, you know, emotion and play and fun and excitement is a really important part to learning. And strangely enough, there's a neurobiological reason for that too, and that is that dopamine, the chemical in our brain that sends us joy and is responsible for our pleasure centers, actually strengthens synapses. So when you experience pleasure through play and excitement and fun and activity, you are literally strengthening those same synapses. So that's a really important part to how children learn, really, isn't it?
Yes.
And, you know, I like to tell people the example of, you know, that learning and memory is state dependent. So it depends on our emotional state, so fun, etc. But also negative emotions can hold our memories, and, you know, we'd rather not have those, but it happens. But when you think about when you walk past a certain flower, for example, and it has a fragrance, and you smell it and you go, oh my gosh, that reminds me of such and such a time, because our senses, our sensory input, what we see, what we smell, what we hear, all provides that experience and creates the state that we're in for learning. I also want to just touch on the prefrontal cortex of the brain that is responsible for critical thinking and impulse control and short-term memory and sensory stimulation is under a huge amount of development in childhood. So, and hang on to that impulse control part. So it's interesting. The part of the child's brain that is under development, that is responsible for them flying off the wall because you buttered the toast the wrong way, is the same part of the brain that makes them an incredibly malleable and a learner. It makes them a learner. They are primed for learning. So remember that next time your child or your child that you're working with flies off the wall for some reason, thank them. Yes.
I'll try.
But yes, it is the part that allows them to learn so well. And, you know, consider children who grow up in multilingual households. They can learn 3 languages by the time they're 5 and not develop an accent. And that is the same reason. So now it's your turn. I want to ask you a question, and I'm going to use this little thing called Slido. I'm going to put this link in the chat here. Now, in this link in the chat, you'll see, if you can click on that, you will be taken to a poll, and we're going to develop a word cloud together. So in this word cloud, I want you to think about how, in your mind, how do children learn? And I will also share this screen, and you can see the results as they come in as well. So with joy, yes, play, absolutely. Please click on, through hands-on experiences, repetition, doing things over and over again. Excellent. Excitement, yes. Inquiry, support, practice. All these things that are coming up here. I love plays, really, right in the middle, isn't it? Which is fantastic. That's exactly what we're trying to get at. Children are learning through play, aren't they? Copying what other people do, conversations, observing, exploring. Imitation, yes. Fantastic. By doing things. Yes, isn't that brilliant? I love it. So all these things that Hayley and I have been talking about are coming out. So you all know this stuff already, don't you? You already know it. So what we've got to try and do is, as Hayley says, is spot the STEM. We're already doing it. And the STEM skills that we are trying to develop are already there. We just got to find them and help massage them. So the big things that have come here are play, curiosity, questioning, using all their senses, absolutely. And that is definitely what we know about learning, memory, and connections in the mind. That's fantastic. Okay. The next one I'm going to put up for you is this. How can we create an environment that allows children to learn naturally? Open-ended experiences, yes. Child-led. How can we create an environment? Inviting play space. Yes. What's an inviting play space? Lots of materials, open-ended materials. Child-led, of course, free play through relationships. That's great. You know, relationships are a really important part of how we learn. In fact, our peer system is the same part of the brain where our reward systems, that dopamine, is in use. So absolutely, relationships are a huge part of how we learn. Provide relatable play spaces based upon interests. Absolutely, following the child's interests. There was a wonderful phrase or quote somebody told me once, which was something like, oh, well, nope, no, I can't remember it. Sorry, there you go. That's my brain failing to make a connection when I don't remember what it is. Giving them space and time, flexibility, being supportive, being inclusive, allowing risks and mistakes to happen. Absolutely. And it's really important as educators also to show that taking risks and making mistakes is absolutely quite okay. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, mistakes allow us to grow and learn.
I have a question, and you can type in the chat if you like. But who when they first read that question needed somebody else to answer first, so that they could then build on that person's ideas? Who looked at it a bit blankly? Because I have to admit that I looked at that question a little bit blankly. I wasn't sure where I was going to go with it. And then somebody else put open-ended experiences, and that helped get me going. And I was like, oh yeah, open-ended experience. Oh yeah, through relationships. Oh yeah. So it wasn't until someone sort of opened the floodgates that I could actually put into thought what I wanted to say on that subject. Did anyone else find that? And it's okay if you don't put that in the chat. But I find that sometimes I need someone to just get me going, to just give me a little bit of a hint. So one of the things that I would say is, and I think play encourages this, is that you can see somebody else playing and then build on those experiences. If you can see what someone else is doing and you can take it that extra step, or it can give you some ideas.
Absolutely. Being able to build on children's prior knowledge as well is a really important skill, isn't it? To be able to support and what's that word that you all educators use? Scaffold. That's it. The language, the scaffolding, isn't it?
Yeah, we've got a few people agreeing with us, but I think to be honest with you, as adults, we had that kicked out of us in high school. It was all, oh no, you mustn't copy, you mustn't. But actually, those discussions and looking at something from somebody else, through someone else's eyes, is actually as important, you know, because then it helps clarify it in your own mind as well.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And this, you know, this kind of environment, it invites, as some have said, where is it? I've lost it on the word cloud. Inviting play space. You know, it invites curiosity, and children are naturally curious, aren't they? I remember part of that thing I wanted to tell you, which was, you know, you can throw marshmallows at a child's head and call it eating, but it's not, and it's paraphrased really, really wrongly there. But you get my drift. You know, you don't need to force children to learn. They are there ready and willing. You just need to make it inviting. So I'd like to move on to the third one, which is, thinking about your role as an educator, or indeed even as a parent, which is, how can we support children in these environments? How can we support co-constructed learning and inquiry-based learning? What is that role that educators have? Role modelling?
Thank you, whoever put that role modelling.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I had a conversation about that this morning.
Yes, so intentional teaching. Role modelling, role modelling is important, particularly in the early years, because children are looking to us adults to figure out the world around them. They are looking to figure out if something is fun and exciting or not. Now, think about your early, your high school experiences. Who was your favourite teacher? And consider why. I think back to my high school, and I think my ancient history teacher, like, she stands out in my mind. And she was the most enthusiastic teacher I had. She was exuding, Plato. She was just right in there. And I don't follow ancient history anymore, but I could feel her excitement. And that is part of that role modelling, to show children that STEM, science, thinking about thinking, questioning, reasoning, trial and error, these things are fun and exciting, and we want to do them. So working alongside children, encouraging children, storytelling. Yes, storytelling is fantastic and a great pathway to STEM exploration. In fact, if you take a look at our website, we have a page of literacy links, which is lots of wonderful children's books, which you probably already know. And the jumping into STEM inquiry from those topics.
I just love some of the things that people are coming up with. Encouraging children's input, I think, is so very important. Knowing that, giving that feedback that they have their own ideas, and accepting those ideas and running with them. Allowing yourself to take a step back and let the children lead the conversation is so important. Those conversations that we have, where we develop the vocabulary of STEM as well, because as we know, if you don't have the vocabulary to talk about these things, then you can't actually think about them in depth. You need that vocabulary as well. So that allowing the children and allowing yourself to take a step back and let the children discuss their observations and describe their observations is so important.
And isn't it wonderful how we can help develop children's language through STEM? Just asking children to make observations and describe their experiments is just brilliant. And when we as parents or educators can help give children new language to use, they can begin to use it themselves. So, they don't know that the word hypothesis is any different or any trickier than the word watermelon. It's quite okay. And I have a wonderful personal story on that front myself, which is my daughter when she was about a little bit younger, about 18 months old. And we were out on a weekend on my parents' boat, and we went down into the hull of the boat where it was quite warm. And we went down and she looked around, she goes, it feels like an incubator in here. And I was just floored. My chin hit the deck. I was so gobsmacked. And I had to think about it for a while, and it took me a couple of days to figure it out, that we had been reading quite repetitively, as you tend to do, this book about Manakura, the white kiwi, whose egg was raised in an incubator, and it was warm in the incubator. And it was just so lovely to see her at such a little age use such a big word, but in the right context, absolutely in the right context. So what else have we got? How can we solve it? Posing the problem. I think that's a wonderful way of, driving process for children, not giving them an answer, but asking and encouraging them to take on the problem themselves and come up with an idea. And Yes, absolutely. Knowing their prior knowledge is part of that, and that scaffolding, being able to help them get to the next step. Absolutely. Discussion and reflection, that's a really, really important part and a very big part of the science process in general. And we will touch more on that when we talk about the scientific inquiry cycle or inquiry cycle in the next webinar. So there you go. With 3 questions, you can tell me far more about inquiry-based learning than I could ever tell you, I think. You already know it. It's just about applying it to STEM and spotting the STEM in the everyday. Next webinar, we are going to do a whole lot of in-depth stuff about STEM and hands-on experiences. And Hayley has a fun activity for you to do now.
Are we getting to that? Okay. So I can't see you. So I'm sort of hoping that you have some Post-it notes and a pair of scissors. And I can't tell whether you've picked them up or not. So it's the blind leading the blind here, but we'll have a go. Okay. So what I've done is I've taken my Post-it notes, and I've got 2 different colours, and I've layered them. So here's one I prepared earlier. If you look, what I've done on here is I've tiled a blue and a yellow and a blue and a yellow Post-it note. And I like to use Post-it notes for this to begin with, because, and particularly when doing webinars, because then you don't have to get the glue stick out. But obviously it doesn't have to be, you don't have to use Post-it notes, because I know they're not easy to recycle. You can use scrap paper, but for the time being, we're using Post-it notes in this. And what I did was I put a yellow Post-it note, a blue Post-it note, yellow, blue, and I layered them to make a little bit of my own pad. Okay, and all I'm going to do is cut a wavy pattern on my Post-it note. Now, what we're talking about here is shapes. So it's part of mathematics, but it's shapes that tessellate. And if you need to go into depth in this, there's a little thing on our website that will go into it a little further. But we already know that our squares tile or tessellate. In fact, I've got tessellations on my floor. You can see that I've got a tiled floor and I've got square tiles that tessellate. And because I started with a square that tessellates, I know that the shape formed will tessellate as well. So this new shape that I've made will also tessellate, will also tile. You can make them as fancy and complicated as you like. What I like to do is I like to find a shape that I like that will tessellate, and then I cut it out of card and draw around it and colour it in as a picture. Now, we mentioned earlier a little bit about mathematics, or actually not mathematics. We talked a little bit earlier about STEM and art and the A in STEM. And I'm going to share my screen with you. So what I've got here, and this is actually how this particular artist, Escher, this is actually how he started. He started with a shape, give it a rectangle or a hexagon or a square that tessellated, and then gradually snipped a little piece away and made different shapes and then used them to tessellate. So if you see, I've tiled using these particular shapes, and because there's always one that you do earlier, I have one earlier as well, which is a little bit more complicated. And I made some birds out of my Post-it notes, and I tessellated those as well. In response to you, Jenny, so these, to start off with, I had tiled my Post-it notes, my squares. Then I took my Post-it notes and I cut down the middle and used them to form a shape. And then I tessellated my shape and made a tiled pattern. And I also have one also made out of Post-it notes, actually. And that's my birds made out of Post-it notes there.
I'd love to see what everybody comes up with. Do bring them back for next week's webinar. That would be fantastic. I'd love to see what everybody does.
We have quite a few different resources, especially for National Science Week. The webinar has been made available due to Inspiring Australia. And so we have National Science Week, and this is one of the resources that we've done for National Science Week. And it is about sea turtles and about tessellations as well. There's also a video if you need some extra help.
So we are right towards the end, which is fantastic. We're going to be right on time. I'll just do a quick wrap up of where we've come to. So we've been talking about how children learn and how what kind of environment children need to learn in, and the role of the educator. And you'll see that this is really underpinned in the educational pillars of Little Scientists, that is co-construction, inquiry-based learning, and metacognition, understanding how we think. And our educational approach, I'll just run through these quickly. Again, these fit into what we've already been describing and talking about, which is each child is an individual, and children are already confident and involved learners. They are primed, ready to learn. They have their own prior knowledge and competencies and experiences, and we can help develop those through their experiences and learning. Following the children's interests is incredibly important. There's no point trying to force a child to learn anything, because it won't work. And allowing children to participate in the decision-making process enables children to desire to learn, to want to learn more. And of course, concepts are temporal. They're constantly changing and being refined based on new learning. We're not trying to make quantum physicists out of 3- and 4-year-olds, but we are trying to help enable their critical thinking and logical thinking skills so that one day they may become quantum physicists, perhaps. And of course, lastly, adults' genuine curiosity and wonder and questioning are absolutely central. So
if you think just touching on that, if you think of all the scientists that you know from in life or on TV or anything else, all of them have that genuine curiosity and questioning about everything.
I think one of the really interesting things about scientists, and everybody could take it on really, is that constantly ask why. Continue always asking why. Never assume that you're an expert. In fact, there is a nice little phrase, I think it's a Zen quote of some sort, which says, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, and in the expert's mind, there are few. So, don't assume that you know everything or know anything, really. Just keep learning, keep asking questions. Now, just so you know, on our website, there are plenty of early STEM resources. There's the literacy links, there's provocations of sorts, there's all sorts of things on there. Have a look. You can become a Little Scientist House. Hayley is your lady there. She will help you out. And of course, workshops, we are trying to pop them online and such, but we will see you next week for another one. If you have any questions, throw them into the chat